I'll be discussing Chapter 10 for Psychology 241, Developmental Psychology. It is, as you can see, the title is Middle Childhood, which is up until about 12 years of age, 6 to 12. And the topics that are going to deal with social and emotional development. Really critical time for this age is kind of through middle school. There's a lot of stuff going on, so let's talk about some of the issues that we have involved here. Okay, so a couple of the learning outcomes theories, some of the theories, influences, talk about things like divorces, those types of things as well. Social development, influence on school on there, and some of the things that tend to develop emotional problems that develop during this time frame as well. Okay. So psychoanalytic theory, Freudian, he talks about the latency stage, and that's one thing we've talked about in the past and other maybe psychology courses earlier. This one is this is the stage when young people are really kind of a quiet stage form. They're focused on where they fit in sociologically, psychologically, and they really deal with a lot of sexual issues and stuff that occur. That a lot of this is when you go to a middle school dance and you've got boys on one, the girls on the other. The older elementary school kids maybe deal with cooties, that kind of stuff. It's really not that important. Gender isn't that important in this age. They're kind of learning where they fit in to the bigger world. And then Erickson talked about the industry versus inferiority. So this is really about young people mastering something, or at least affecting something in a great way, and a lot of it has to do with inferiority as well. So either the mastery or the inferiority complex that might develop during this time frame. Supportive environments lead to more industrious activity, and less supportive environments lead to that inferiority stage kind of process. So that's the Freudian Erickson world of development. In the social cognitive, it's really more about internal rewards and punishment become less important. Students or children start to grow up more, and they're kind of move away from their parents a little bit, especially more in the later elementary school and early middle school ages. They tend to start to look more to their friends for role models, teachers for role models, things like that. They tend to spend more time away from parents, and so they have other influences like teachers and other adults, and even peers and other symbolic models. Symbolic models would be like entertainers or athletes or things like that. So then we have the according to Piaget, which is a social cognitive developmental theory. He really talks about the understanding that there's self between themselves and others. So there's a certain latency period, and kind of ties into Freud's concept as well. Is they're really focused on where they fit in and how they're looking at others. They're viewing their social network. They're trying to find what actually works for them and what fits in. They're not consciously saying that, but they're kind of looking at what feels good, and they start to move more towards friends and things like that tend to have like behaviors rather than just someone who is maybe geographically closer to them. So a lot of that's happening as well as they're growing older. They start, self-concepts and their abstract internal or personality traits start to become bigger issues. Before, they never really thought much about whether they're a nice person or not, or pleasant person or not, or friend or not. They start worried about that a little bit more. Again, eye color becomes important. This is when a lot of young people can really develop some traits that are really either positive or negative. If they grow up in a diverse environment, they may end up not seeing other people as different, because their skin is different, but they see them as being similar to them, and it ends up not being an issue in their world. Or it can be just the opposite. If someone grows up in a highly, let's say, a really white environment, they might have some anxiety towards people of color. Okay, so these are things that are going on in their world as well. There's nothing that the children can really um, affect just yet. They're learning from the environment around them. Self-esteem is a big issue in this time. They really, as young people are looking around where they fit in, they're also looking at the kind of social caste system that occurs starting in middle school. And as many of you are aware of, that middle students can be very mean in the bullying aspect. And so how that all fits in is real important. Self-esteem is important in terms of their growth and their sense of relationships later, their sense of self-worth in terms of job selection, college grades in high school, those kind of things. And it's also important that the self-image gets developed by a supportive environment. And supportive environment doesn't always have to be parents. It could be nice to its parents. It could be just many of us remember an outstanding teacher we may have had during those ages that really affected us and made us feel good about being in their classroom, and so on. So, or vice versa, if they have a real abusive teacher. And I say that in a soft sense. I don't know necessarily there's something physically abusive, although that's probably out there, but just people that are not real nice to them, and that can drive self-esteem as well. Okay, as well as peers, of course. This learned helplessness is an interesting thing. Is they as the second bullet says, helpless children believe that success is due more to ability than effort. And this ties into locus control a little bit. Some things we've learned about. It ties into self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, remember, was the ability for was it a confidence we have that we can be successful. This is when students look at others, especially like athletes or dancers or things that maybe are more outward, and they see people doing really well on them, and they think, well, I'm not as talented as that person. I don't have the look that person has, and they start pegging themselves into a certain level. And it's kind of like, well, why try? Because I'm never going to be that good. I can never make those shots. I can never do that dance. I can never read that well. Those kind of things. Or vice versa. They feel very confident, and their self-efficacy is very high. Locus control is very internal, and they think that they can really accomplish anything. Those things are going on. But this idea of learning helplessness is kind of a critical issue in that time frame. So the family now, this idea, and these are typical gender roles, but mother's interaction are generally the caregiving, and this would be in a standard environment, not necessarily one that has, this would be more when there's original biological parents still involved. But as you can see, children and parents spend less time together. This is a normal process. This is a process. Our job as parents is to help these young people grow up and be responsible, effective adults, and that our job is to have them move out of the house and move away. It's sometimes painful for us as parents, but that's our job. So this is a time when they're supposed to be moving away. They're supposed to be being with their own friends, more time at school, being involved in different programs, athletics or music or art or those types of things. So a very normal process, and usually the caregiver is the mother and the father is the recreation person in a traditional biological family. Then there's non-traditional lesbian and gay parents. There is very little research that there's a lot of research that verifies that there's very little evidence that children who grow up in lesbian or gay parent environment have any less of a let's say self-esteem issues or things like that, any less of an experience. It's a positive experience. And they tend to move towards their original orientation, sexual orientation that they would have with traditional parents or non-traditional parents. So it doesn't really lesbian and gay couples who raise children are not necessarily those children don't necessarily have any greater chance of becoming a gay or lesbian later, or greater influence of it. I say chance is the wrong word, but have a they don't become more of them don't become lesbian or gay than people who grew up in a traditional family. So that's something that kind of goes against maybe some of our feelings or thoughts about things. But anyway, there are some very competent and good lesbian and gay parents that raise their children as just regular children. Divorce actually it can be a major problem or not, but usually there's some impacts. So kids like to do things with their parents. I know when when my kids were young, and many parents can probably empathize with this, they liked it when mom and dad were together in the same room watching TV or playing a game or something like that. And when only one of them was there, they kind of wanted the other one to be part of it. Because that was certainly our case, and it was many of the people I know that grew up around the time that we did and raised our children the time we did. But in divorce situation, most of it are mothers, and maybe this was a norm. At one time, that was the only option. Really, when there was a divorce happened, it always went to the mother. Now, sometimes, especially if the mother is the abusive one in the relationship, many times the dad will get custody. And many dads now are fighting for custody because they have a better, family situation. Maybe they've remarried to a really a nice woman, and they have a family environment that can help the children. Less maternal attention leads to self-esteem levels. So many times parents get so focused on themselves that they lose track of that they're one of the main roles now going on still is raising those children. And many children have divorce situations, have behavioral problems. Not everybody. These are these are trends. These aren't necessarily exacting outcomes. So in step families, there is a risk that if a parent is going to be abusive physically or sexually, it will generally be a step parent, someone who's not biologically attached to that child. Many step parents step in and you wouldn't know the difference. They're just treat them as the biology of their own. In other situations, there is step parents, and there is the mom's kids and the dad's kids, and they're treated very differently. And that was certainly the case when I grew up. My stepdad would just beat the crap out of his kids, and my mom told him, "You don't ever touch my kids." So, a very different environment, and it led to a very different set of rules and almost two separate families living in the same household, which was difficult at times when we started to grow up and went into upper middle school and high school and beyond. So parents that feel as though they're continuing the marriage for the sake of the children, the kids know when things are going on, things are going bad. They may not want a divorce, but they also want this to be over, whatever the argument's going on, whether it's physical. Many young children, including myself, would lay in bed at night listening to their parents scream and yell at each other, and hanging together for the sake of the children, at least for a few years, and then after that, decide to make that split. So, there's a sense of self-esteem in that, because many times when there is a argument by parents, it involves or blames some action of the children. Not that the children have caused it, but they become part of the discussion, and that then tends to lead the child to believe that they are the ones that created the separation, and it's certainly not necessarily the case. Anyway, so it can be, staying together for the children is probably not the best thing, but if they're willing to work through it, maybe there's a certain age when the separation might be more expedient rather than a certain age when the kids really need that mom and dad there. But it's a tough time for parents, and when they know that person isn't their future, their spouse, that they've got to make some decisions, and those decisions always involve the children, whether they take it that way or not. So maternal employment. So this is something that is much bigger. There was a time, you go back to, and go back to show how old I am. We'll go back to things like Donna Reed, where Mom Donna would. She was the mom who stayed home. She was always in a dress and her pearls, and she'd be washing dishes with an apron and a dress on and heels on, and never worked outside the house and always took care of kids. I mean, that was a lot what was going on in the 50s and 60s, maybe early 70s. And then women went into the workforce, which was great. And Title IX hit and really started pushing some of the glass ceilings up and up and up. And now women have, not just working because they're a second income, but working because they have a career that they want to develop, and it's part of their persona, part of their self-esteem issues is to have a career and be an effective member of society beyond just being a parent. One of the problems for moms especially, and this is something that I think is prevalent in many houses, is that if mom and dad both have full-time career jobs, generally, this is generally, and certainly there are exceptions, mom comes home and has to do the cooking. Mom comes home, at least most of the time, has to worry about laundry. Mom comes home sometimes and has to focus on homework. Dad comes home and one of the typical, maybe stereotypical presentation is, has a beer and sits down and watches, ball game or TV or something or whatever, but has less responsibility when they arrive home than the mom does. And that's certainly not a fair environment. And hopefully it'll keep migrating more and more so that my wife and I had a rule that whoever got home first made dinner. And that was, of course, we'd stay at work sometimes. We didn't have to do that. But that was a whole different story. But that was our rule when we came home. And whoever got home started dinner and got the kids to sit down and start doing their homework. So if she had a late night, and we might have everything done, dinner eaten and homework done by the time she got home, and vice versa. So hopefully that will continue to work forward. It certainly has with my children and their responsibilities. So anyway, so peer relationships. So this is when kids start to kind of group up a little bit, and I say that in a positive way. They find people who are similar than them. They really start looking for leaders. They start looking for confidants, and so middle school is a tough time because it's hard to find that level of person. Many of the young people aren't mature enough. Emotional intelligence isn't formulated enough to be able to handle some of this stuff. But that doesn't mean they don't keep looking for it. Okay, and young people do that constantly. And acceptance and rejection become real important. If they have a really good friend base, 2 or 3 really close people, it seems to work better for them. Then those people are involved in lots of different things. This is, bullying becomes a big issue at this point. It has a major impact. And a lot of the bullying, there are people that have talked about that have grown up in environments that are not as ideal, I guess, than the traditional mother, father, warm, caring, high attachment rate environment. So, and they really have trouble, or they see that aggression is the way to solve problems. And it generally isn't that way because usually they're rejected by their peers, so they may have a friend or two that really stays with them, but they're with them because they would be afraid if they left them. I think that happens sometimes as well. So anyway, that's kind of a personal opinion mixed in with this academics. So anyway, development of friendships. Friendships, become more important in this 8 to 11 years of age. They really start finding their friends. And as I said all along, is that this is a time where grouping begins. Hopefully most of the time it's in a very positive way, but it's also, time when, they find those 2 or 3 friends, hopefully. And if they don't, then it creates some problems for them as they go along. They become that alone child, the one that sits at the lunch table by themselves. And hopefully there are some people, especially nowadays with buddy benches and things like that, that students will go and find that one that's alone and sit with them and just have a conversation with them. That's a major impact for those children. So these are concepts of friendship, and this would be a nice slide to have available when you take your quiz. And this is kind of different stages. This is approximate ages, so it kind of tells you that where, as they start becoming more mature in their relationship, 12 and above, they develop this interdependence. Your friend is somebody you rely on, whereas when you're up here, it's just purely a physical attraction. You have someone to play with, kind of thing. And it kind of moves into that progression as it goes along. And this intimate mutual sharing, it's really a nice thing whether it's a neighbor or whether it's someone really close at school, that someone develops a relationship like that, or there's a relationship or two. Usually it's one, two, that kind of range, where they really have someone they can rely on, help support them, stand behind them, and have their back as they go through those stages. School. Now, school can be a major challenge for some young people, and others it can be just a tremendous enjoyment. And by school, I don't mean necessarily sitting in a classroom and learning multiplication tables, things like that. More in the social aspect of it. There's mature behavior. So kids have to do things on their own. They learn helplessness where they sit around at home and, I can't do this. And teachers generally are saying, well, no, this is what you will do. Set limitations on their behaviors. They start learning how to act and take care of themselves, and mom and dad aren't around, and you got a teacher in a class with sometimes 20, 30 kids, and they've got to learn that ability to be able to do that. They move more towards a nurturing, positive environment. If the teacher is kind of a mean one, they will find another one, maybe their PE teacher, their art teacher, or one of their specialist teachers, their Spanish teacher, who they will become more attached to, and it doesn't mean that they're a parent substitute, but they certainly like being in that class more, and they feel more comfortable in there. And IQ scores, achievement motivation, these all become part of that influencer. And whether young people are in special needs programs, and they're either mainstreamed or not mainstreamed, those are all part of this things that schools can have an impact on them going forward. So it's a major thing, especially through middle school. So diversity is really important. I've had a great privilege of teaching at schools that were very diverse, and it's such a different environment than ones that are primarily white with a small people of color percentage. In the 15%, one school I taught at that was primarily all white. They have a different perspective on just life in general. They live in a bubble. Diversity can be a big part of things, and people can see the inequity that occurs. Regional expectations, school, recess play, those kind of things are real important, that schools can help set boundaries on when they play games and do things. When they play games, it's really psychological developments occurring. It's not just about the game. They're learning how to do things, follow rules, make friends, those types of compete in a positive way where it's just for fun. And so those things are kind of important. So schools can have a major impact on them. These are just some of the issues here of if you have a principal that gets out on recess and walks around with the kids and is part of that, they enjoy that. And these are all things I think all of us can agree upon that important. Empowering teachers, I think, is a real important to decision making and also critical thinking, asking questions. So we don't do enough of that in the younger ages, even our high school ages, even many times. And frequent assessment, that's not quizzes, it just means that students are getting constant feedback of how they're doing, and usually from a positive slant. It's very helpful, and the empowering aspect there. So there's just some good things. That would be a nice slide again. I know there's some on the quiz. There's I think a question or two about this topic, but most of you I think would understand it pretty well. So when teachers do these things, they expect the best. There's been a lot of research done that and one that I remember specifically was there was a two groups of students, and teachers were given, they were actually randomly assigned. One teacher was told that the children were academically challenged and that they didn't perform well on tests and so on and so forth. The other one was told that they performed very well on tests. These students were randomly assigned, and at the end of a certain period of time, the students did a pre and a post test, and the advance of the students that were in the teacher that was told that students were high achieving actually were quite a bit higher than the teacher who were told they were academically challenged. So she was afraid to push them and help them master the curriculum. And that has been replicated, that particular study has been replicated many times, and it's pretty obvious that the teacher's perception of the ability of success for the students has a major impact on the classroom and the classroom's ability to work through the curriculum. And then developing an emotional environment, I think, is important as well. The Pygmalion effect, that's exactly what I just talked about, is they have a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the teachers, and they don't use the word dumb much anymore, but I know when I was in school and even my early years of teaching, you would say things like, "Well, that's a dumb answer," or dumb question. And the student then would consider themselves dumb because of those kind of things. But we try to get away from using that a lot. But the Megan effect is just how you treat them well and they'll perform well. This became really big, and I coached high school football for years, and the phrase that we used to use was that when they would make a mistake is that you're much better than that. And that phrase would be much better than, "Why did you do that? That was really stupid." So the fact that we use it in a negative sense of critiquing them to say they're much better than that, led them believe that they can actually do it and they should be doing it. And the self-fulfilling prophecy. This is kind of the locus control and those types of things that we've talked about before. Is that if they feel like they can do something, they look at who has influencer, and then whether they have the confidence of doing that as well, completing that. So there's different ways to motivate students, and you guys can look through these, and they're very obvious, but they're not always. Every classroom doesn't have these, and maybe the reasons why, based on the fact that all teachers are individuals and they all see value in different aspects. So there's just some nice things there to do that. So this is a sexism discussion that has to do with different things that happen with girls, unequally by the teachers. They pay less attention in math, science. There's been research that show that teachers in math and science and technology tend to call on the boys. Some male harassment, and some get ignored. So the textbooks may have more information about, especially science and math. When they give an example, they will say Eric or Greg did something rather than using a girl's name. So anyway, that's happened there. Boys are generally louder. They dominate the communication. It's important that teachers bring out the girls and quiet the boys down so that the girls feel very comfortable. And boys will call out answers. It's kind of really funny that just seems like a gender-based issues, but they will. I don't know whether they're just anxiety or whatever that's going on, but they'll tend to do that. But there's a sense of sexism that occurs in the classroom as well. So these are some things about your conduct disorders, it calls them, but basically they are just people who don't follow rules or don't, are abusive. The origin really here is certainly nature nurture always takes part of it. I think in this case, a lot of it, the genetic component can be there, but if the person grows up in a very supportive family environment without these other issues here, the genetic component will be muted. And And vice versa. If it's a genetic component for a kind person, they grow up in an environment that may have a major impact on them as well. So I really would tend to believe, and I think most research shows, is that the nurture part is a huge part of conduct disorders. When students are acting out, when students are bullying, I think it's important for the administrators and teachers to look at what what's behind that. Generally, I don't think well, the research. I haven't seen research that shows that these kids just naturally mean and evil kids. There's something, one of these issues in their background that's there, and so bullying is one of those things that I think there needs to be. First, you need to look at the person, the victim, and take care of the victim, and then influence the bystanders. But then also, at some point, you've got to treat the bully, and somehow find out what's going on in their world, and help them through that. Otherwise, that person will just turn around and do it to somebody else. But it may sound kind of I don't know, kind of unfair that you treat them because they're actually acting out because there's issues in their life, I think, as well. So these are different inventions in social skills and things, but I think you really got three groups in a bullying environment, and I'll stay with that a little bit because you have the bystander who is willing to allow it to happen, and you've got the victim who it's being happened to, and then you've got the bully. And I think all of those need to be addressed in these types of disorder issues. Um, Depression is a huge one when students feel like they don't fit in. Um, it's really hard, and sometimes, as it says here, age 7. Before age 7, many young kids are just quiet. They're watching and learning. A lot of young children really watch and learn, or observational learning, how people treat each other. But these things start happening in middle school. Thoughts of suicide come up, difficulty concentrating. Turn ADHD when we give them a drug and not realizing that it's probably depression. And we're treating for ADHD. I don't know if sometimes we spend as much time diagnosing young people as we could or should. Anyway, there's some things about child depression, um, and usually it leads to lower level contribution. So this is attribution style. So this is locus control. This is everything's someone else's fault. Everything is I can't be successful because this happened. That that made it so I couldn't do it. And um, those are a lot of issues that are going on, as well as low level confidence may occur because of the depression as well. Um, Now, some of the genetic factors, there's some cases there, again, as I said, of these nature nurture. Many times it's psychotherapy, many times, and by that I mean it's a counseling, but also it's parents and teachers getting young people, something as simple as that, as getting them involved. Or it could be somebody walks up and there's a little, young kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, is sitting at a lunch table by themselves, and you got one of the popular kids walks up and sits next to him and just starts talking to him. How you doing? What are you doing? What do you do at home? That kind of stuff. That can lead to a huge issue, huge positive issues of the child maybe overcoming some of the depression issues that are going on. Drugs with younger people, again, tend to be more and more used, and it's probably not as important unless they've diagnosed very specifically that the serotonin level is low, and then they will give drugs to increase that. So general anxiety disorder is something that comes up, and it's just many people are diagnosed with anxiety, and it starts really kind of in middle school. Um, and this can be a major issue. And again, this sometimes it leads to medication, but many times it is something that could be solved with a good counselor and/or a supportive environment at home. But many of these things are occurring because the environment at home isn't supportive. So maybe the drugs are help to minimize the the actions that occur from anxiety disorder, and allow the treatment to take place. That's a good use of, I think, some of the trouble drugs that are out there. And phobias occur. Those things are irrational things that occur, and they pop up in children, and they can actually continue on into adulthood. But those really start at that point there. Um, Separation anxiety can occur from friends, can be certainly from parents, especially in the younger ages, sometimes even in the middle school ages. Kids want to go home right away because they have a sense of comfort there, and when they go out and play with their friends, there's a certain level of anxiety that's there because they're wondering if their friends are going to treat them well, and so on and so forth. Or they're going out for a school team or a play or a dance or a club or something like that. They can occur. So separation anxiety can occur primarily from parents, but also from a close social network that they may have at home, at school with friends. Um, so this is kind of the phobias, dealing with the phobias, the different treatments, antidepressant medication is certainly sometimes part of it. I think these are kind of listed in order here a little bit. As back in school can mean physically in school, but also is in school means to be active in school, getting into a club. Sometimes phobias get so bad the child won't go to school and they just cry and whine and at home. It's so part of it is getting back to school, and then the part of that is getting involved in school, and so we'll that's something that needs to be addressed, and probably not as common as students get older, although certainly can be lead to a lack of proper attendance in high school as it goes along as well. So that's pretty much it. Many of the stuff I think people will find that it's somewhat, I wouldn't say common sense necessarily, because most of it there's tons of research that backs up most of what's in this chapter, but it also is something that you can look at and you can say, yeah, that makes sense. If I experienced that, some people experience that, and it seems to be okay. So um, anyway, here's the key terms. If you have questions or need help with something, we've got emails, we've got contact me on Remind, and we've also got we can get on a Zoom and have a conversation about it. So anyway, that is chapter 10. Thank you very much.